Okay, welcome to the Fat Man's GM's revisitation of the Space Opera game system. As you've already seen some of these, you probably already know the spiel. If you like the videos, click on it, join, tell your buddies, tell your friends. You don't like it, make fun of it, post comments, send letters to my wife, whatever works for you. Anyway, this is Star Sector Atlas 3. Now, I want to point out that the atlases are numbered, but after this, when we start getting to where they start skipping atlas numbers, there's a number of them made, but there are a number of other star chapters or charts. As an example, this particular, the Azuriach Imperium, controls some 20 to 30 star sectors. So this is the core star sector, and if you wanted more information on other star sectors in that area, it'd be up to you as a Star Master, the the Star Master, to come up with those on your own. But these are give you the basis for them. This is the third of 4 human-dominated star systems, Imperial systems, or Imperial star empires, if you will. Of the 4, these are probably the most dangerous and the most, I don't know, convoluted to some degree. The Azuriach Imperium. Now, in the latter years of the fall of Terra, when the the pure Earth movement was dominating the planet and driving people off or kicking them out, in some degree trying to terrorize the outworld colonies and control them, there was a number of people who just had enough. And the core of these people came from Western and Eastern Europe. A handful of individuals decided to start. There was a mixture of private people and some corporations who decided, and I think several remnants of several governments. One of the biggest problems they were having was that the pure Earth movement was doing its level best to exterminate any kind of culture difference. They wanted everybody to be on the same footing as being humans and Earth first. And so they were actively eradicating anything that reeked of other culture, including historical fact, historical, data, information, the whole thing. So, in this case, a group of these people decided they'd had enough, and we're going to settle the Deneb star sector. Now, the Deneb system is roughly 1,000 light years away from Earth, so at the time would it be the furthest expansion of humanity had made up to that point. And its isolation works to its advantage over time. Talks about, Richard Ower, the evil genius of empire. Now, one of the issues with this particular system, you could almost make these bad guys in a lot of aspects, if depending on your social, cultural view set of your real world, okay? Because for the most part, these people have taken the concept of supreme human to the as far as they could go. This would be, you can make an argument, this is the Fourth Reich, that the Germans have resurrected the Nazi Party, and you would be terribly wrong. In the same aspects that they do a lot of similar stuff, the way it works out is much more, this is what could, if the Nazi Party had actually held to their dogma, how things could have been different, and how much more the one, or the pure race, or the supreme race would have achieved. So, it goes on about the economy, early history. So here's a statement. It says, clear a new barbarism, a new dark age was now descending upon us. There will soon be no time for more terrible than humanity has seen in any period in its history. Here we are on a tiny world, its limited resources exhausted by 13 billion people, and that rising steadily by more than 300 million per year. Yet pure earther maniacs would deprive us of the means to develop and exploit our own vital off-world projects. They would divert our diminishing resources to purely immediate and short-term needs of the planet, refuse to limit the population growth in undeveloped nations, terming all our urgings to do so as a racist plot to commit genocide on non-white races. They blindly ignore the strain on our resources, refuse to slow the accelerating demand by limiting population, scoff at the need for massive off-world support. This is sheer lunacy. Okay, I want to take a moment on that and point out that in the system that the Pure Earth movement put together for government was based by proxy of numbers. So the truth of the matter is many of the third world nations dominated by having more third world nations than non-third world nations, if you will, which have always had issues because you've got third world, so we're the first world and the second world. I don't get it, but the problem was if you look at some of the very extreme third world government practices and systems, and imagine that being extended over the entire planet, of just how corrupt and elitist and difficult it would be to operate under them conditions. And in those aspects, the bulk of the government was dominated by people of ethnic diversity, which is not a bad thing in the aspects of as long as everybody's on equal footing. The problem is there's always this urge or this itch to dominate everybody who's not of your ethnic background, and it's there. It's there today. We have issues with it today, and I'm not going to get into a diatribe on that. But if you dominate to the point to the exclusion of others, well, you're no better than the people you were being, subjected to in the past. So this is where these people believe that the white races were in danger of being eradicated, and any option of their social and economic culture was going to be eliminated. So they took it upon themselves to get out when the getting was good, and establish their own worlds, their own government. So the populations of the colonies expanded at a rapid rate. The colonists tended toward large families, which they found easy to support with their abundant produce and rapidly expanding industries. 5 years after the Great Rebellion and the founding of the Solar and High Republic, the independent colonies of the Azuriach combined into a loose confederation, the Azuriach Common Market of Worlds. The ACM renounced all allegiance and loyalty to Terra, except for a vestigial concern for the old country back in Europe. Contacts were finally other human worlds became attenuated over the next few decades, finally ceasing entirely. So they basically isolated themselves and worked on improving their manifest destiny was going to be. And the culture therefore took on an increasing divergent course marked by insular attitudes and deep distrust of anyone or anything un-Azuriach. So, under Richard Ower, who is the one that's cited for being the founder or the modern day Hitler or Stalin of their era. And doctrine of human superiority. The concept of master race is not unique to the Azuriach Imperium. Many races have found the opportunity at some time in their histories to give expression to the notion of racial superiority. Such ideas are inevitably shrouded in a mystical belief that the superiority of one group or another, usually such superiority is not born out of practice because it's supported by nothing except an anthrocentrical arrogance that denies the possibility that others might be equal or suppressed. Okay, so this is what sets them apart from previous attempts at this. This is what makes them a very feared foe and very dangerous. Their military is highly capable, and their Starfleet is very. If it wasn't for the fact that the Terran Federation has sheer numbers on their side, these people could take them on one-on-one. the Azuriach have got the advantage. What is unique about the Imperium is that it has succeeded in becoming one of the two most powerful nations in the Terran Quadrant. It has done so because the Imperium has concentrated upon establishing a genuine meritocracy of leadership. The Imperials are not the arrogantly vain, goose-stepping robots that some wishful thinkers have made them out to be. The Imperial Leader Class is anything except stupid. High rank in the Imperium is based upon actual ability and the quality of performance evidenced by the individual. The Imperial leadership possesses a high intelligence and extensive general education and excellent specialist education, Spartan discipline, unswerving loyalty to the Imperial State, and a driving personal ambition and utter ruthlessness that will not admit a failure. Further, the Imperials leaders can call upon well-trained says some commentators who have seriously erred in comparing the Imperial State to the ancient regime of Nazi Germany and terror of the 20th century. Nor does there exist a better refutation of a simplistic notion than the words of Richard Orr's grandson, Jonathan Orr, who succeeded the first leadership of the Imperium in 2259. Those who liken supremacist philosophy and practices to those of Nazi Germany and terror, I can only answer with a derisive contempt. We bear no resemblance to that pack of bumbling losers. Hitler was a drug-soaked megalomaniac, an egotistical incompetent surrounded by a crew of corrupt and self-serving sycophants. There wasn't a leader in the whole rotten lot. The Nazis never understood power. They lusted for domination over Terra, over all of Terra, but where were their programs for reorganization of humanity into a true race of masters? They spoke effusively of racial purity, but they sank in the worst depths of depravity by granting rank and privilege to weaklings who talked a fine game, proved themselves to be intellectually and morally bankrupt. When it came down to the test by fire and iron, they made mere accident of birth the sole measure of superiority and inferiority. They make their own powers and abilities. We of the Azuriach spit on such delusions of superiority that fools deserve to fail, and fail they did. So basically, in this system, you have to constantly prove yourself being better or more intelligent or more capable than the next guy. And you don't get a promotion just because of who you are. Just because your dad or your mom was somebody important doesn't mean you're going to be important. And you got to show that you're capable, and you can draw yourself up. Another distinction is that they don't believe in the class system that per se. They have a system of classes based off of participation in the society, but it is plausible for somebody from a lower birth through drive and ingenuity and resourcefulness and ability and proven ability to rise up to the highest ranks of the supremacy of the Azuriach Imperium. So that makes it a much more dangerous group of people. We're very fortunate, our historic fact, that the core Nazi party at the time didn't have this actual resolve to follow through. If that was true, Hitler would have been removed. He would have stepped down. He would have passed the torch when somebody much more capable showed up. And he most certainly would not have employed a lot of the people he employed as his key people, because they were whack jobs. No getting around it. Rise of the Imperium, Imperial citizenship, goes through all the stuff involved in that. I never played a campaign with anybody in this particular empire because I felt these were a good set of foes, very dedicated, very dangerous, made for good bad guys, not so good for playing. Although I suppose you could play in here and make a good challenge out of it, depending on how your perspective is. I have personal issues on some of the concepts behind it, so that's just me. So anyway, going on to visitors to the Imperium. First leader, the leadership oath, the Imperial Shadow Cabinet, Imperial Leader Guard, blah blah. Typical stuff you need to know about the government. Human Superiority Party, the various factions. Therein lies one of their weaknesses, perhaps, because their supreme leader, the initial feller who come up with the concept, was a bit of a nut job himself. As he got older in years, he became more demented. He had some form of dementia, and so he would just rail and put out copious amounts of written and verbal material that often conflicted each other or was just outright incomprehensible. You had to learn to interpret a lot of what he said, because it just didn't really make obvious sense. From that rises a bunch of factions, because you've got different people who get different opinions out of what we see. Now, I see that today, having been raised in a Christian family with a number of my aunt and uncles and my grandparents all being ministers. Now, the Bible is the Bible is the Bible. It's been the same print more or less for hundreds of years, although it's gone through some revisions. And if you look at a King James versus a modern Bible, just because the terminology changes, that terminology change actually changes some interpretations of things, or it can. And each minister, while understanding what the other minister may be saying or thinking based off of some piece of the written word, their interpretation of it can be turned around, and they pass it on to their followers, if you will. And I've always had mixed opinions on that. Anyway, so they would have these different factions, and while they don't outright in combat with each other, they are in struggle to say who's right and who's wrong, which causes some derision and slows things down a little bit in society. This is why the Azuriach Empire has not dominated all of everybody else. This is a big reason for it. That, and having to control their masses. They are, in some degree, an oppressive society, and with that oppressive societies come problems. So even a non-oppressive society has plenty of problems. There's another version of the star chart, and once again we have, in this case, it says 62 planets in detail. So we're looking at their core worlds. Some of them are highly developed, some of them are very primitive and borderline. Yes, this is an alien race. It just happens to look like dogs. Phanis was one of the worlds of the Rallarul Confederacy. There's a nice page and a half on a bug planet, but it's an interesting bug planet. This is one of the exceptions to the rule. Grindify was one of the few planets seized and contaminated by bugs during the bug incursions of the Deneb, and during the end of the 22nd century it was held relatively untouched for 93 years until Jason Ower, the great-grandson of Richard Ower, demanded that this festering blot on the honor of the imperial supremacy of the sector be removed. While the bug fleet's covering the planet was eliminated in short but savage battle, and the Imperials gained dominance over space over Grindify, nothing but quite prepared the Imperial troops for what awaited them below. The initial landings were literally annihilated within hours. Secondary assaults were savaged in equally short time. After a loss of some 26 crack assault regiments, it was apparent to the Imperial generals species below was different from the normal bug for a number of reasons. Worker insects, still operating at disorganized and clearly unskilled mobs, did assail human troops. Basically, these guys, this group of bugs, for some reason or another, show a bit more of a sign of individuality and growth than the standard bug. Now, all you gotta do is look at Starship Troopers, and then you understand the concept of bugs. And I use a version of the bugs in my pending game system of Stellar Frontiers for the same reason. They're an implacable flow. And in settled space, in my Stellar Frontiers, which the regions of the galaxy that's settled are called settled space. It's the mere sign of any kind of bug sign. You eradicate it. You stomp on it with both fists. And there's numerous reasons for doing so. First off, their expansion rate is just insane. They will take over a planet in a few years. They can dominate and destroy a heavily populated world like Earth in a matter of a decade or less. Second, because of this, because of their totally alien concept and inability for humanity to even relate to them. It's in our nature to eradicate these things. We cannot no more not do that than we would step on a cockroach. It is what it is. The third point is, if you just happen to be the ruler of a planet and it gets infested with bugs, you have to take into account that you are now on a running clock from two sides of the candle. The candle's burning at both ends at this point. Not only do you have a limited amount of time to get a control of and eliminate this bug incursion before it tears up your planet, destroys your population, and you with it, but you also have to take into account that your neighbors and the greater Imperium itself is going to come and do it for you if you can't do it. And if it gets to a point where they can't eradicate it on the ground, they're going to back off and they're going to obliterate the planet, you with it. So they're not going to take any chances of these things getting out and spreading to other planets in the region. In this case, so high levels of individual initiative were evident. Regular bug warriors. Her response was typical: nuke them till they glow. Where 2,400 thermonuclear devices were exploded, including 100 cobalt-encased warheads, and the surface was converted into a glass-lined wasteland. The atmosphere and seas poisoned with radioactive fallout as well. Sterilization procedure was apparently successful, as the surface was cleared of all bug installations and all bug activity ceased. Unfortunately, they were underground. And it's a hive, for God's sake. The whole bloody planet's a hive. But anyway, they discovered later that this particular culture was different to some degree, and that says here, though contact with the Grendels have been very limited, those few in the Federation have had a relationship with their diplomatic representatives. All reported they clearly definable personalities with a wit and humor that is perhaps unique, but somewhat human in quality. It would be interesting to note that they have a lot of stuff, bug products that they want to export, but if their fellow bugs would come across them, they probably would eradicate them too, because they are not, somehow they've evolved beyond what is standard for the bugs. Just an interesting side note. So, going on, pretty much what we got. Nice picture of the star chart. There we have it. Star sector, Atlas 3, the Azuriach Imperium. Like it, love it, find it, don't find it. As I said, by itself, without the core rulebook, this material is usable in any sci-fi game system that involves space travel. So you could modify this fairly easily, and the background material doesn't need any, or hardly any modification to fit. This planet here could easily be in Star Wars, or Star Trek, for that matter, or a dozen other game systems. Traveler. And we reference some of this material for Traveler when I was a kid when we were playing this stuff. So, stuff to think about.